The application process when it comes to development finance is much more in-depth than a bridging loan, for example. So there will be a requirement for an application form, there'll be a requirement for GDV breakdowns, including your square foot, your square meterage, the individual unit breakdown in terms of cost if you're doing a commercial conversion or a new build, copies of the planning permission, copy of the pre-commencements being ticked off, copies of all of your different insurances, where you're going to go for your new build warranties come the end of it. There's all of these different bits of paperwork that you require that are much more in-depth than you would expect from a bridging loan. Two of the ones that I want to kind of tick off and go into a bit more detail on are your build cost breakdown and your GDV breakdown. So build cost breakdown is incredibly important, and it is an evolving document throughout the process of your development finance application. So when you first go for development finance, your build cost breakdown will be incredibly simple. It will probably be a pound per square foot, for example. It will be, if you're working off of £150 a square foot, 180, 210, whatever it may be. It will just be more than likely a pound a square foot. What will then happen is once you've gone for development finance, once the application process has begun, you will then go through a process where you then go out to tender, which means you then go out and approach maybe 3, 4, 5 builders and get them to tender what they believe the cost of that development is going to be. So at that point you then have a second build cost breakdown, which has normally come from the builder and will normally be more itemised and more detailed. You will then end up having to go to the QS, so as part of the development finance application process, they will then have a quantity surveyor check over those costs. So at that point, you'll probably actually end up with a third set of build costs. So at that point, the QS will go out, they'll look at the figures and they'll say, well, actually, we think this should be this, we think that should be that, and you'll actually end up then with a third set of build costs. So throughout the application, you're actually going to end up with your simple set, your tendered set, and then your quantity surveyor set. And that's normal throughout the process. The second one is your GDV breakdown. So again, when you first start, very similar to your build cost breakdown, when you first start it'll be very simple. It will probably just be, we believe the GDV is £2 million, £1 million, whatever it may be. And chances are it won't be split down particularly between the units. Then as you go through the application process, obviously the valuer will then come out to the property and they will say, okay, well we believe the property is worth X, Y, Z. So at that point you end up with a more detailed GDV breakdown, which normally a step before that you will probably go to a couple of estate agents, for example, and you'll create a more detailed version of the GDV breakdown for yourself. So you'll end up with your sort of this is what we believe the GDV is, with no kind of evidence or background. You'll then end up probably going to an estate agent, getting a slightly more itemised GDV, and then you'll end up going to the valuer, who will then give you your final GDV, and will come back to you and say, well, we believe that the GDV is this, and this is how it's broken down, these are the comparables, and that valuation is normally 60 odd pages long. It's a fairly chunky document, but as a rule of thumb, they're the two breakdowns that are probably going to evolve throughout that application process. And other than that, it's your usual things like your application form, which you'll just have to pop on, your CV, which we'll go into a bit more detail about in a later video, and experience of the contractor, which we'll go into a bit more detail about in a later video as well. But in a nutshell, that's the application process.